Let's start off by defining a new reference table. So we press on New Table, type in the text, and we add a field. We notice on the right we've got the field attributes such as field name, description, type, length, and so on. So we start typing. The first name will be the country code. And now we add another field, the country name. And that's really all we have to do. We just press Save Design, and we can start adding records to the table. We go back. We have a bunch of options that we can choose from. We'll start with Open Table, and we'll press on the New button to add a record. We've got our first two fields, the country code and country name. Press Save, and we've got our first record. And we press New again to add the second record. And afterwards, we'll add a whole bunch of records. So whenever creating a list of records, we can always have a search on one of the fields or a free text search. And we can sort the columns or move them. We can go in and edit a record or go in and delete a record. And now we'll quickly create another table called the Destinations table. And we'll have three fields. First will be the city code, and followed by the city name. And the third field will be the country code. Now this country code is the same country code that we used to describe the table before. So we can see that this field already exists in the repository. And what we want to do here is bind it to that table. So down here where it says reference table, we will choose countries. So we're binding it to the countries table. So after saving, if we look at this field, it's really a lookup on the countries table. So now if we go into the table, open, and start adding a record, for example, the first city code will be PAR for Paris, followed by the city name, and we'll choose the country code, France. We save it, add a whole bunch of records, and that's basically how we, in a few minutes, created two tables that are connected to each other. We can also group the records as well. And now we'll take a third table that we've already created called campaigns, go into the design, and we want to make the first field mandatory, so this is how we would do it, by choosing mandatory. And now we want to add validation rules. Let's try this first field and say that this field, its value must be less than 50. So then we go to this validation rule text box that we write, this field must be less than 50, or less than 50 in this way. And we will also add the error message that will appear if the field will be less than 50, not less than 50. So we save the design, and let's take a look at how that would work. Go into a record. If we press save right away, he says the campaign ID is mandatory. So now let's fill in the rest of the fields. And notice on discount, if we put in something that was greater than 50, it would say it has to be less than 50, so we correct it, and it's okay. So let's go back to the design and take a look at some more validation rules. For example, between these two dates, we want to say that the to date has to be greater than the from date. So this is exactly what we would type down here. Or we can write in such a way. And of course our error message. And now, for example, if we wanted to say that the total cost, we wanted to make sure that it was equal to the airfare times the discount divided by 100. So we could also write in such a way. And that would be the validation check that we would see, that he's checking that the total cost is correct. So let's go back and take a look at how that would look. So again, if we take a from date that would be greater than the to date, we get our message. So let's correct that by taking a date later on. And if we change the airfare, we notice that the total cost is not what it should have been. Now it's okay. On the other hand, we could have done something different. We could have said that the total cost is actually derived from the airfare and the discount. So let's see how we would do that. So we go back, we just copy the validation rule and place it in the field called derivation rule, because this field is going to be derived, and because it's derived, it's also protected and it has that value. So that if we would change the airfare, we'd get a different value, it's calculated, or change the discount, we'd get a different value because it's calculated. And that's how derivation rules work. Go back into the design and see what else we can do. For example, adding tabs. You press on tab, we can write the text of the tab, and one of the attributes of the fields is which tab it will appear in. So we take these two date fields, and let's take a look at how that looks. As we can see down on the bottom, we've got the dates, we put in some other fields in a different tab, and that's how it would look. We have another option of moving fields around, so we can add a little more to the design. And let's take a look at the repository of fields that we've already created. So we type in, for example, dates, and we choose a field, and it will now appear on our form. If, for example, we delete it, we can always go back and undo that delete by choosing it again. And that's the option that we have working with a repository. By default, the framework handles all the database connectivity, connection pooling, and so on. However, we have the option of defining the database table name and choosing the database itself from a list of database connection IDs which we've created. So we do so here, and after pressing on Save Design, we can go back and start adding records to this table, and then we'll take a look and see how it looks in the external database. So we're going to add one record here, save it, and add a few more, and we see the behavior is the same whether it's internally or externally defined. Let's see how it looks in the external database, the hotel change table in our SQL Server database. This is the design, these are the records. So we have that option. We have another option if we already have an existing table in an external database, such as this hotels table. We can define a new table and import that into the framework. So here we're going to define the hotels table, press on the database icon, type in the name, choose the database, and press on import, which brings in the fields from the database catalog. We can then enhance the fields with reference tables, validation rules, and so on. We can also bind a field, for example, to a Google Map API. So that if we go now into this table that we just imported, choose a record, a hotel here in London, and we've got all the information here in our reference tables and the Google Map attached as well. If, for example, we wanted to take this list, look for a hotel in Paris, a 5-star hotel, here we've got one over here, go in, and there's our hotel. Let's go back to the database icon and see how we can define a parent-child relationship between two tables. For example, in the hotels table, if we type in the parent table, the name hotel change, that means that the hotel change table is a parent of the hotels table. So if we save design, go out, and go into the hotel change table, we will now have an option in each hotel chain which will show us all the hotels belonging to each hotel chain. For example, here we have a list of the hotels that belong to the hotel chain, and if we went into a form, we would have a button on top that'll do the same. So we can do it from the form or from the list. We also have an audit on every single change that's been done to our table. So for example, if we look at this record here in the campaigns table and we did some change here, we can save it, go back, and go into the audit option where we can see the record, the before and after image of what has changed, so that we can know who's done what and when to all the records in all our tables. And lastly, we have an option of working with JSON files so that we can, on one hand, get the script that's created this table, and if, for example, we've had this script created externally, we can import it, create a new table, and then in this window paste in the script and type in run script, and we have the exact same table.